My son texted. We'll keep the spare key. Her parents will use the guest room. After I paid the down payment for the house, my daughter-in-law said, This is our house, Susan. Please respect our boundaries. So I paused the transfer. Locks changed. The bank sent a notice for $600,000. They despised me. Wanted to erase me from their lives. But they didn't know that the house papers were still in my name. I still remember the way the fountain pen felt between my fingers that morning. The mahogany table gleamed under the light in the attorney's office, and I could see my own reflection as I signed my name on the check. $200,000. Not a gift thrown lightly. It was a stake in my son's future. In the life he was building. Jared, I said, sliding the check across the polished surface. This is not charity. This is an investment in you. In Erica. In your marriage. But you must understand one thing. My voice will not be silenced in the house that this money builds. Jared's eyes softened. He leaned forward, hugging me in the office chair as though he were still the boy who clung to me after his father's funeral. Mom, you've already done more than anyone could ask. I promise. You'll never feel like an outsider. It was Erica who sat stiffly beside him, her manicured fingers curled around her leather purse. She smiled. Thank you, Susan, she said, her voice sweet like iced tea, but cold at the bottom. This means everything to us. Her words were right, but her eyes told me more. They darted briefly to the check, and then back to her lap. For her, it was not about gratitude. It was about possession. The money was fuel, and she wanted the engine entirely in her control. The closing on the house came quickly. A white colonial in Greenwich sat proudly on a tree-lined street. It was the kind of neighborhood people worked their whole lives to enter, and I had delivered it to my son with one signature. On moving day, I stood at the foot of the front steps, while movers carried in couches and boxes. Jared was radiant, sweat on his brow, grinning like he had conquered the world. Erica directed traffic with clipped efficiency. She carried herself as though she had always belonged to this address. As though the brass door plate already bore her name in history, the housewarming was arranged within a week. The place smelled of new paint and expensive candles, and wine glasses clinked in every room. Neighbors filtered in, praising the crown molding, the wide backyard, the granite countertops. I stood quietly with a glass of Merlot, watching Erica glide from guest to guest like a practiced politician. Our house, she kept saying, her hand resting possessively on Jared's arm. Our rules. Our freedom. Each time, my heart gave a small twitch. Not once did she mention me. Not once did she say, with Susan's help, or thanks to my mother-in-law. The words vanished into the night, like they had never been written on a check. Like my sacrifice was a ghost they preferred not to acknowledge. Jared caught my eye across the room and gave me a little nod, a son's wordless thank you. But it was thin, almost apologetic, as if he already knew he could not balance the scales between us. I smiled at the neighbors, accepted their compliments, and sipped my wine. But somewhere deep inside, the warmth that had come from signing that check began to cool. I had placed a cornerstone for my son's future. But already, I could sense the walls being built, walls meant not to protect me, but to keep me out. But a mother knows. And in that moment, I knew. I was not being welcomed. I was being carefully, politely, deliberately pushed aside. The message arrived before the kettle had finished boiling. My phone blinked on the counter, and Jared's name lit up. We'll keep the spare key. Erica's parents will use the guest room. That was all. No hello, no mother, no explanation. As though the key had always been theirs to keep. As though a house could swallow gratitude like rain, and never show a flood. For a moment I simply stood there, the tea kettle beginning to rattle behind me. The spare key on my ring suddenly felt heavy, ornamental, like a charm that meant nothing. It surprised me, the sting of it. After all, boundaries are practical things. I replied only with a thumbs-up modern etiquette for those who wish not to fight and found my handbag. If they were changing things, better I see it myself. Better not to sit at home imagining monsters, when perhaps there were only shadows. That is what I told myself. Foolishly brave. The afternoon was bright in Greenwich. Their colonial stood as proudly as the day we signed. I rang the bell, and heard faint laughter inside. A television voice rolling over the hall rug. The door opened, after a beat. Erica smiled the way you smile for a neighbor you like well enough. Susan! What a surprise. I stepped in and everything I had chosen had shifted. The walnut sideboard I'd found in a little shop off the post road was gone. replaced by a pale. The indigo rug had vanished under a cloud of cream and beige. Scented candles murmured something sugary. The house smelled like a department store, dreaming of home. On the sofa, Mr. Wilson sat like a ship anchored in comfort. Feet in clean white socks. The remote easy in his hand. Mrs. Wilson had a magazine open on her knees, and a pair of reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. They both looked at me with the benign surprise you reserve for delivery people who have come to the wrong address. "Hello, Susan," Mrs. Wilson said. "We were just settling in. The guest room is adorable. We moved that fussy little chair out, no back support at all. I loved that chair," I said mildly. "Oh?" She blinked and smiled, already turning a page. Jared came in from the kitchen with 2 mugs and the old, desperate kindness on his face. "Mom, I was going to call you. We meant to time ran away, coffee?" I took the cup. It was warm in my hands, but it did not reach me. "You changed the living room. Just small things," Erica said, her voice smooth as satin ribbon. "We're going for a cleaner look. You know, our style. The word again, like a gate closing on a hinge I could not oil. "I see," I said, and kept my tone even. I thought we had aligned on most of this." Erica stepped closer, all polish and poise, the smile narrowing. "This is our house, Susan. Please respect our boundaries." The sentence was delivered like a legal notice. Jared fidgeted, the mug doing small circles in his hand. "It's just temporary with her parents, Mom. Their kitchen renovation went sideways. 4 weeks. Maybe 6. We'll host Thanksgiving somewhere else if that makes it easier." The television murmured from the sofa. Mr. Wilson turned it down a notch. "Generous. 6 weeks becomes 8. Any lawyer will tell you time has a way of expanding when the rent is free. I understand emergencies," I said, and I did. Life collapses. A cushion adjusted as I sat. Coasters appeared expertly beneath my cup. Before I could set it down, Erica tilted her head. "We'll make sure you have notice next time before you drop by. Okay? Just so we're all comfortable." Notice. In a home I had laid at their feet. The irony was too on the nose to be funny. I put the cup carefully on the coaster and looked at my son. "Jared?" He wouldn't meet my eyes, poor thing. He nodded at the floor. "It's just easier, Mom." Yes, I thought. Easier for whom? I stood, smoothing my jacket, the way you do when you are finished with a meeting and there is nothing left to negotiate. "I won't keep you," I said. "Enjoy your afternoon." At the door, Mrs. Wilson called out, "If you know someone to haul that old sideboard, dear, we're thinking of donating it. No storage in this place." I turned and smiled, all teeth. "Leave it. I'll handle it." Outside, the sun had softened. My reflection hovered in the front window for a second like a ghost, and then it was gone, replaced by the movement inside Erica, laughing. Jared retreating. The Wilsons rearranging a throw pillow to their liking. On the porch, I touched the key on my ring. It was, apparently, a souvenir now. Strange. How quickly a door can become a boundary. And a boundary. A verdict. I walked down the steps slowly, measuring each one like I was counting back from a difficult truth. Driving home, I told myself to be calm, to let the first wave pass. But in the stillness, the earlier chill spread. Something inside me, call it pride, call it memory, tightened its grip. The distance between my son and me did not widen with a dramatic crack. It stretched, inch by inch, like a hairline fracture nobody tended in time. And I understood, as the light fell blue over the road, that if I did not take care, I would soon be standing on a separate shore, waving across water that used to be a hallway. The invitation came like an afterthought, almost careless in its delivery. Jared called me the morning of the dinner. His voice hurried, apologetic. "Mom, Erica's hosting her parents tonight. She thought you might like to come too. Might like to come too." Just a half-hearted add-on. The kind you give when you realize etiquette might frown on your silence. Still, I told him yes. A mother goes. Even when the welcome mat has been rolled halfway back. By the time I arrived, the table was already set, silverware glinting in candlelight. Napkins folded with the precision of a lifestyle magazine. Erica floated between kitchen and dining room like a hostess preparing for royalty. Her parents seated comfortably, already sipping wine. I kissed Jared's cheek, and he smiled in that helpless way of his. A smile that said, "Please don't make waves tonight." The Wilsons asked about the neighborhood, about the garden, about Jared's long hours at the bank. They praised Erica for managing everything so beautifully. And then, The first strike casual, yet sharp enough to slice. You know, Erica said, topping off her mother's glass. It feels so good to finally be independent. To know this house is ours, not something we're relying on anyone else for. Her mother nodded eagerly. Yes, dear. That's the way it should be. Standing on your own 2 feet. I set my fork down gently, the silver clinking against porcelain. Independent, I repeated, my voice calm, though my chest burned. Of course. Though, let's not forget how this all began. Without, Erica's head snapped around, her smile widening as though she were speaking to a child who had wandered into grown-up talk. Susan, this is our life now. Not yours. The words landed like a gavel in a courtroom. Final. Irrefutable. The Wilsons glanced at one another, smugly satisfied, as though the verdict aligned with their long-held opinion. I looked at my son. Jared's eyes darted to his plate, to the chicken, to anywhere but mine. Silence is sometimes louder than words, and his silence roared. I forced myself to chew, though every bite tasted of dust. I tried again, more softly. I only meant to say, but Erica lifted the conversation away like a balloon. So, Mom, Dad, we're thinking of repainting the upstairs. Maybe a warmer tone. Just like that, I was cut out of the circle. Invisible in a room I had once envisioned as part of my family's legacy. The meal stretched on, filled with nods, chuckles, plans that did not include me. When dessert came, a perfect little tart with powdered sugar, I declined. My appetite had left long before. I folded my napkin carefully, as though precision could restore dignity, and placed it by my untouched plate. Thank you, I said, standing. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled against the chair's back. It was lovely. Erica smiled, victorious. Jared mumbled something about seeing me out, but he stayed seated. Perhaps that was easier too. Outside, the night air wrapped around me, cool and bracing. My car gleamed under the porch light, waiting like a loyal friend. I slid inside, shut the door, and let the silence hold me. It was then, in the stillness, that the truth crystallized. This was not ignorance. It was not youthful arrogance or oversight. It was a decision, a choice to erase me from the very foundation I had laid. And betrayal, once recognized, cannot be unseen. I drove away slowly, my headlights cutting through the dark, my resolve tightening with every mile. They thought I would simply swallow humiliation. But I am Susan Miller. I know contracts, I know leverage, and I know when to fight. This dinner had not ended me. It had begun something else. Something sharper. Something inevitable. The night after that dinner, I sat alone in my study. The humiliation from Erica's words still rang in my ears. This is our life now, not yours. It had replayed like a broken record, every time I closed my eyes, burning deeper, turning shame into something harder, colder. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and pulled the thick folder from the bottom drawer of my desk. It was the purchase file for their house, my son's house, as the world would call it. But in truth, a house that stood because I had placed the first stone. I had kept the papers, not out of distrust, but out of habit. A lifetime in real estate law had taught me that the fine print is where fate hides. The lamp cast a golden circle over the papers as I spread them out. Page after page. Deeds. Contracts. Schedules. There it was, black ink on cream paper, signed and notarized. My name. Not erased. Not sidelined. Not replaced. I was still on the deed. The bank had received only the down payment. The remaining balance, $600,000, had not yet been dispersed. Without it, the house was not secure, not safe. In 30 days, the bank would foreclose if the payment did not arrive. For a long moment, I simply stared at the figure. The numbers bold, as if mocking me. They had spoken to me as though I were irrelevant, as though the house were a fortress from which they could bar me. But the truth was the opposite. I was not outside the fortress. I was its foundation, and without me, the walls would fall. My heart beat faster. Not with fear, but with something sharper. Power. Rediscovered. It surged, like blood returning to a limb that had long been numb. I reached for the phone and dialed the bank. At last, a crisp voice answered. I gave my details. The property address. The loan number. The representative confirmed it without hesitation. Yes, Mrs. Miller. Payment is still pending. Unless the funds are released, the loan will be in default, Within 30 days. 30 days. A month. That was all that stood between them, and the loss of their precious independence. When I hung up, the silence in my study felt different. No longer heavy with defeat, but humming with possibility. I leaned back, my glass of wine untouched on the desk, my mind moving like a chessboard. This was not vengeance for vengeance's sake. This was education. A lesson in gratitude, in respect. I had given freely, but I had not given up my dignity. And they needed to learn that generosity does not mean servitude. I began to sketch the plan in my head, each step unfolding with the clarity of strategy. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not knock at a door that had been shut in my face. I would use the only language they seemed to understand: control. Legal. Precise. Undeniable. I felt my lips curve into the faintest smile, though there was no joy in it. Only resolve. My hand reached for the phone once more. This time not for the bank. This time for someone else entirely. The number was already in my contacts, a service I had used once before after misplacing keys on a holiday trip. The locksmith. As the phone rang, I caught my reflection in the darkened glass of the study window. My face was calm, my eyes steady, my expression carved into something they would not recognize. When the voice answered, cheerful and routine, I said the words slowly, each one laced with quiet steel. Yes, I'll need the locks changed. Entire house. As soon as possible. And when I hung up, I sat back in my chair. The documents spread before me like evidence in a trial, and I whispered into the silence of the room. Now, let's see whose house it truly is. The weekend they left for the mountains, I made my move. Jared had mentioned it casually on the phone, as though speaking of the weather. We're taking a little trip, Mom. Erica thought it would be nice for her parents. We'll be back Sunday night. His voice was cheerful, unsuspecting. He had no idea that every word only gave me time, and opportunity. Saturday morning, the locksmith arrived in a white van, his toolbox clattering against the walkway. I let him in with a nod. This is still my property, I told him firmly, though my voice was calm. Every lock, every door. Replace them all. And when you're finished, no one gets a copy but me. He glanced at me once, perhaps curious, but he did not ask questions. Professionals rarely do. Within an hour, the house yielded itself to me alone. The old keys, the ones that had been turned against me, now lay useless, stripped of power. I held the new brass keys in my hand, cool and bright, like freshly minted justice. When the work was done, I stood in the entryway, breathing in the silence. I sat at the kitchen counter and drafted the message carefully, choosing every word like a line in a legal brief. If you want your house back, come speak with me. Nothing more, nothing less. It was not threat. It was invitation. But it was also truth. That night I slept well. The first good sleep since that humiliating dinner. By Sunday evening, as the sun dipped behind the maples, I poured myself tea and waited. The calm of my own living room wrapped around me, and I imagined the scene about to unfold. At 7:30, headlights swept across the driveway. Car doors slammed. Laughter carried for a moment, the tired joy of travelers returning home, and then the first rattle at the door. A pause. Another try. Keys fumbling. Confusion thickening. Then Erica's voice, sharp as glass. What the hell? Jared. The key isn't working. From my chair I could almost see her. Fists tightening. Eyes flashing. There was more fumbling. Jared's voice rising. Pleading with the lock like it might listen. Then the pounding began. Erica hammered at the door, her voice echoing down the street. Open this door. This is our house. The Wilsons, dignified in their retirement, stood on the porch clutching luggage, their faces twisting from confusion to horror. Mr. Wilson barked something about outrage, while his wife whispered about calling the police. Inside, I sipped my tea, its steam curling like smoke from a small victory. Mom! Jared's voice came at last, muffled through the wood, heavy with desperation. Mom! Are you in there? Please! What are you doing? I did not answer. Let them feel it. The helplessness, the exclusion, the sharp edge of being shut out of something you believed was yours. The shouting continued, a cacophony of anger and panic, until finally it broke into silence. Silence. Except for the soft rustle of envelopes being pulled from the mailbox. I could hear the tear of paper, the murmurs turning into alarm. Financial notices. The bank had done its part on schedule, sending reminders, warnings, stamped with red. I knew what those papers contained. Pending default. Balance. Required. Within 30 days. I pictured Erica's hands trembling as she read, her fury colliding with fear. I imagined Jared's eyes scanning the figures, realizing for the first time that the fortress he thought secure was built on sand. The Wilsons, their luggage at their feet, looked ready to vanish into the night. Ashamed to be caught in a drama not theirs to win. And me. I sat quietly by the window, tea in hand, the calmest woman in Greenwich. The storm was outside the walls now, and for once, it did not touch me. This was not cruelty. This was clarity. They had mistaken generosity for surrender. Tonight, the house had reminded them who held the pen, who had written the first check, who had the final say. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and leather. A place where lives were decided not by shouting, but by ink. I had chosen this ground carefully, not their home, not mine, but neutral territory where truth could not be dressed up with candles or clever smiles. Across the long oak table sat Jared, pale and restless, his hands clasped together like a boy praying for recess. Beside him Erica perched, all sharp lines and sharpened words, her parents hovering near the door as if invited to a show. My lawyer, Miss Grant, slid the thick file across the table, her pen tapping lightly, like a judge, ready to call the room to order. I cleared my throat and let the silence stretch before I spoke. You believe this house is yours? I began, my voice even, but the documents tell another story. My name remains on the deed. The bank has not received the balance, and without me, in less than 30 days, foreclosure will take what you have called independence. Jared's eyes flickered with recognition, a memory surfacing at last. Erica, however, leaned forward, her nails rapping on the table. This is manipulation, Susan. Pure manipulation. You gave us that money, and now you want to hold it over us like a noose. I looked at her squarely. I gave you a foundation. You chose to treat it like a rope. Miss Grant turned a page and pushed it toward them. It was all there, my signature, the disbursement schedule, the bank's notices, black and white, unforgiving. Erica's face flushed crimson, but Jared's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of denial had finally slipped off. He rubbed his temples, whispering, She's right, Erica. She's right. No, she isn't, Erica snapped, her voice breaking with fury. She's just controlling you, controlling us. We don't owe her our lives. That was when Jared lifted his head, his voice cracking but firm. We owe her respect, Erica, and we haven't given it. She gave us everything. The down payment, the chance at this life. And what did we do? We let your parents take over. We shut her out. We treated her like she was nothing. His eyes brimmed, and in that moment, I saw the boy I once carried through a storm to keep him dry. The room fell into tense quiet. Erica turned to him, aghast, her mouth opening but no words forming. I leaned forward, my voice low but unyielding. Here are my terms. You will sign a legal agreement, acknowledging my role in this home. No live-in guests without my consent. You will publicly, to family and neighbors alike, acknowledge my contribution. And both of you will apologize. Not for my ego, but for respect. That should never have been questioned. If you refuse, I withhold payment, and the bank takes back the house. Decide carefully. Erica shot to her feet, palms slamming against the table. You can't dictate our marriage like this. Jared stood too, but his anger was not at me. It was at her. His voice rose. Raw. She can. Because without her, we have no marriage, no house, no future. You wanted freedom, Erica? It's called foreclosure. The words struck like a verdict. The Wilsons shifted uncomfortably by the door, their grand presence suddenly reduced to bystanders in a drama they could not rewrite. At last, Erica sagged back into her chair, the fire in her eyes dimmed by necessity. Fine, she spat. We'll sign. And your parents, I added. We'll move out. Immediately. Tonight. The Wilsons protested weakly, but Jared silenced them, with a look that carried years of suppressed loyalty. For once, he stood with me. Papers rustled. Pens scratched. Miss Grant notarized with a click of her stamp, sealing the agreement like a gavel striking. I gathered the documents, sliding them neatly into my folder. I will release the funds, I said calmly. But I will remain co-owner of the house for 5 years. Consider it insurance against your forgetfulness. No one argued. As they filed out, Erica's heels clattering angrily against the tile, Jared lingered a moment, eyes lowered. Mom, he whispered, voice heavy with shame. I'm sorry. I placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, steady as stone. Don't be sorry, Jared. Be better. And with that, I left the room knowing the balance had shifted at last. Not in my favor. Not in theirs. But into its rightful place. The garden lights glowed softly against the dusk, strings of warm bulbs swaying gently above the patio. Weeks had passed since the confrontation, and though scars never vanish overnight, appearances could be made presentable. That evening, I hosted a small gathering neighbors, a few old friends, Jared and Erica standing dutifully beside me. To the outside eye, we were a family intact, the fractures hidden neatly beneath polite smiles and carefully chosen words. The laughter of guests floated across the lawn, mingling with the smell of grilled vegetables and roses blooming along the fence. Jared moved among the crowd, attentive in a way he had not been in years. Every time his eyes found me, there was something new there. Acknowledgement, humility, even gratitude. He refilled my glass before his own. He introduced me warmly to neighbors. And when conversation turned to the house, he did not falter. Mom made this possible, he told them, simple and plain. No hesitation. It was not a rehearsed line. It was truth. Spoken at last. Erica, meanwhile, played her role with brittle grace. She laughed when required, spoke lightly of renovations, and kept her words measured. To anyone watching, she was the picture of civility, but I saw the tightness around her mouth, the way her hands clenched the stem of her glass. Resentment still simmered beneath her surface, like embers, waiting for dry wind. Yet for the first time, she knew the limits of her stage. Respect, even if forced, had entered the room. I moved slowly through the evening, speaking to guests, listening to their compliments about the house, the garden, the food. My answers were gentle, but my thoughts were steady. This gathering was not about triumph. It was about balance. I did not crave to rule their lives, nor to hover over their choices. I only wanted the acknowledgement of what had been given, the dignity of being treated not as an intruder but as blood, as mother. As twilight deepened, the guests departed one by one, their goodnights trailing into the warm Connecticut night. Jared and Erica gathered plates inside, their voices low, cautious. The garden emptied, and silence reclaimed the space. I stayed back, glass of wine in hand, standing where the last traces of sunlight bled into violet sky. The air was cool, and the faint hum of crickets drifted from the hedges. I looked at the house, the windows glowing, the home secured by signatures, by contracts, by my hand. The anger I had once carried had cooled into something calmer, sharper. They had tried to erase me, but the truth had been written too deeply into the foundation. They could not live here without passing over my name, without acknowledging the ground on which they stood. I raised the glass slightly, not in toast, but in quiet declaration, and whispered into the fading light. Remember, the deed still bears my name. The garden held the words like a secret, and I smiled faintly. Love and generosity had never meant surrender. They had meant respect, and respect, at last, had been restored. When I look back, I realize generosity must always walk hand in hand with boundaries. Love does not mean surrender, and respect is not something you beg, for it is something you insist upon, even with those closest to you. By reclaiming my place, I learned that dignity is worth more than silence, and sometimes the greatest lesson you can give others is the reminder that gratitude is not optional. If this speaks to you, tap like, subscribe for more first-person grandma revenge stories, and share in the comments which moment made your heart tighten.